Good afternoon to everybody, and Adar Sameach, Mishenichna Simcha, Bat Adar Rishon, Bat Adar Sheni, and we on Parshat Ki Tisa. And at the end of Parshat Ki Tisa, we read about the reconciliation, the repair of Bnei Yisrael with Hashem, and that Moshe Rabbeinu comes back with a second a lot of luchot, of tablets, and he gives it to Bnei Yisrael. But then the Torah tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came down the second time from Har Sinai with the second set of the luchot, that there was a radiance on his face. And I just want to deal very briefly with two matters. What was the source of this radiance? Another way to put this question is, how come only after Moshe Rabbeinu came a second time from Har Sinai with the second Nikot, so the Torah tells us that his face was radiant, and the first time that he comes down, it doesn't tell us that his face was radiant. The first time we know he came down, he came with the lichot and he broke them. So that's the first issue that we want to speak about. And secondly, the issue of Am Yisrael's reaction to Moshe Rabbeinu's radiance. It says that they were scared, that they found it very difficult to be geshet elav, to come and to draw near to him. So regarding the first issue, the issue of the source of his light, the source of this great radiance which shone forth from Moshe Rabbeinu's face, the Bechor Shor, he explains as follows, that Hashem wanted Moshe Rabbeinu's face to radiate Davka on the second time round, to show that these second luchot, they also were written in holiness, and they also come from Sinai. They also something that are divinely given. The first time round, when Am Yisrael were all at Har Sinai, and all Am Yisrael heard the first two Memrot of Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, everyone was on the level of a Navi, and there was fire, and there was thunder. And the way the Torah describes the epic revelation, there was also the shofar. So there was no need to emphasize the fact that the Torah came from Hashem, that the Luchot came from Hashem. But now, in this very private type of setting where there was none of the fanfare accompanied, so to speak, with Matan Torah, with the second Luchot, and Moshe Rabbeinu by himself, he went up to the mountain to bring them down. So in order to emphasize that these were also on the same level of Kedusha, not exactly, but the main thing that they were divinely given. So Hashem made Moshe Rabbeinu's face radiate in something which was beyond physical. We could add on to this that there's opinion in the Gemara that the Jewish people had like crowns of glory. Those crowns of glories is a metaphor for understanding. They had certain perception when they said Naaseh B'Nishma, but after the tragic fall of the Chet HaEgel, those perceptions were lost to them, and Moshe Rabbeinu acquired them. And it's through these perceptions and through this greater understanding that were given from Am Yisrael to Moshe Rabbeinu, that this great Torah, the word Torah is connected to the word or, light. So through his body, through the skin of his body, the light of Torah radiated. The word or and or is the same thing, but the one is skin and the one is light. And Moshe Rabbeinu, who his skin, his physical body wasn't a barrier to his spiritual concepts, so all the Torah shone through him. Okay, that deals basically with the first issue, but the second issue is more troubling, and that is, it's like disturbing, that Am Yisrael's reaction to Moshe Rabbeinu. And before everyone knows the Rashi, which I'm going to quote, but I think beforehand, and I think many people know this comment of Rav Soloveitchik in one of his books on his Drashot of Tshuva, And he introduces one of his themes in Tshuva is as follows. He says he was giving a shiur on Rosh Hashanah, and a psychiatrist in Boston came to him and said to him, he's very disturbed in the language of in the text of the tefillot of Rosh Hashanah. Because how do we start off? Immediately after the beginning of the third brachot is we ask Hashem that he should cause a pachad, a fear, and a terror to be over all the inhabitants of the world. Then what we do is we speak about that Hashem should give honor to his nation, that should give us happiness, and the tzaddikim should rejoice, etc., etc. But the psychiatrist asked him, why are we davening that Hashem should cause the nations of the world to fear him? He says that basically fear and anxiety is always a sign of some form of neurosis. So why are we davening for it? Anyway, Rav Soloveitchik over there went into, he said he thought that maybe the word pachad doesn't in that case mean actually fear, it means more awe. We're not going into that inyan over there. But in this week's parasha, Rashi tells us something very interesting. That Bemet, all the psychologists want to know what exactly is the reason, or what is the basis for constant fears that a person has from a young age. A young child is scared to be like alone without his father and his mother. Other children are scared, or even older children, just to be alone in the dark. What is it that makes people scared? People, when they've got a shop, they go, they relock it, they check that the lock's okay, they're petrified of burglars, etc. People, as we go on and out, there's all sorts of anxieties and fears, and we could call it almost a neurosis sometimes, depending how bad it is. And what is the source for all this? What makes a person inside? What makes a person like scared? So Rashi says as follows. Rashi says, come and look how powerful the effects of sin are. Rashi says, when the Jewish people before Chota Egel, they saw the Shekhinah, they saw the divine presence. The Torah describes the divine presence as like this massive fire at the ascent of the mountain, threatening, so to speak, to almost consume the mountain. And yet the Jewish people would look at this and I'm sure they were awestruck. I'm sure that they had a tremendous feel of Yirat Shamayim, true awe of heaven, but they weren't scared. And the Torah says, and Rashi says, and look at what happened now. The Jewish people fell after Chota Egel, and now they're too scared to look at Moshe Rabbeinu because of the radiance in his face. So just look how sad it is that this is the power of sin. So we asked the question, why is Am Yisrael scared? What is the root of being scared? What is the root of anxiousness? The root of anxiousness is sin. When we say the sin, we don't mean it only that a person did an avera. It means that when a person is less spiritual, when a person is more, he's ruled, so to speak, by the physical forces. So that causes a person a sense of anxiety, a sense of nervousness and neurosis. In fact, the Gemara says it explicitly in Masechet Brachot that there was this one person who was walking around, and the way he walked, he seemed like agitated, he seemed nervous. And one of the Amoraim said that that's a sign that he was a sinner. Because a person who's just a normal person who is filled with Yirat Shamayim, that person fears nobody excepting Hashem. Certainly not a human being, and not any other factor which could cause him to be cautious. That's something else. But to be afraid, to have a sense of anxiety the whole time, that is something which is it comes from a sense of sin, a sense of a person being ruled over by his physical impulses. So that's this is the explanation, the explanation of Rashi, the difference between the reaction of the Jewish people to Moshe Rabbeinu before and after the Chet HaEgel. And I conclude that actually, I remember once my Rav in South Africa, Rav Hidovitz, Nishpato Eidem Begidze Meromim, he said that, not every time you see a person doing Natilat Yadayim, and then a person looks and he sees that there's no drop over here, and he wipes his hands, and then he does it very delicately, and then he looks, is his nails, are they made clean, not clean? So he says, okay, so sometimes there is such a behavior. What it does is it does reflect a person's being very, very being makpid, bedaktek, very cautious and careful that the mitzvah should be done properly. But many times he said, it's just a yetzer hara. And instead of doing the mitzvah calmly and being elevated by the mitzvah, there's a certain neurosis for certain people when they do mitzvot, to check here and maybe this and maybe that and maybe it's not so proper. And all this is part of the confusion and anxiety, which actually its roots are in sin. So here we have this great jasod, people who are generally keep Torah mitzvot, people who have a yirat shamayim, have the fear of heaven. They're not people who are scared. They're people actually who are confident. They're people who have got a simchat chayim and not plagued with this pachad. That's a great message of the end of the Sidra, which speaks about the radiance of Moshe Rabbeinu's face. Shabbat shalom lekulam.